It's Wednesday, it's the 11th of June. You're watching Arirang Korea's only global network. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Gun-young. Now, with the suspected owner of the sunken Sewolho ferry still on the run, police and prosecutors raided his religious compound earlier this morning. Now, the goal was to find and arrest two aides of Yoo Byung-eun that are thought to be playing a critical role in directing Yoo's escape from the manhunt. The two have yet to be found, but some other members of Yoo's religious cult involved in his hide-and-seek were arrested in today's search. Arirang News Yoo Li-an has the latest development.
Some 6,000 police have raided a religious compound in Anseong, south of Seoul, to arrest two women suspected of helping the fugitive de facto owner of the Sewolho ferry, Yoo Byung-eun, evade authorities. They have yet to find the two women, but they did arrest four other church followers, three for aiding and abetting the fugitive ferry owner and one for interfering with their search. Yoo is a founding member of the Salvation sect religious group, which is believed to have acted as the control tower for his escape. The massive operation comes less than 24 hours after President Park Geun-hye lashed out against the joint investigation team for taking too long to find Yoo.
지금까지의 검거 방식을 재점검하고 다른 추가적인 방법은 없는지 모든 수단과 방법을 검토해서 반드시 법의 심판을 받도록 해야 할 것입니다.
The Sewolho ferry owner has not been spotted in public since the tragic disaster occurred in April. Prosecutors say he has previously attempted to smuggle himself out of the country by offering to pay brokers a whopping 10 billion won, or roughly $10 million. Hours after President Park's comments a day earlier, prosecutors held an emergency meeting with police, military, and government officials and decided to have the Navy watch over the coast surrounding Korea to prevent the fugitive from fleeing the country. This is the first time that the Navy has been called on to take part in an operation designed specifically to prevent someone from being smuggled out of the nation. Yoo Li-an, Arirang News.
Now, moving over to the trial of the captain and surviving crew members of the sunken Sewolho ferry. Now, they have claimed that they did everything they could in their capacity, although they were among the first to be rescued by the Coast Guard. The opening session of their trial revealed a number of challenges facing state prosecutors who are charging them with murder. Our Connie Kim explains.
The biggest issue in the trial is whether four senior crew members, including the captain, will be found guilty of murder by willful negligence for abandoning the ferry prematurely and leaving hundreds of passengers to die. On the first day of the trial, state prosecutors accused the four of killing some 300 passengers by failing to make every effort to rescue them. Apart from the murder charge, the four were also charged with negligence that led to the sinking of the vessel and caused great casualty. The 11 other crew members were similarly charged. The senior crew members argued it was the Coast Guard's responsibility to rescue passengers. Captain Lee Jun-suk's lawyer asserted that it was unjust to hold Lee responsible for what he could not do when he had taken steps to protect the vessel while he awaited the arrival of the Coast Guard. A court official quoted the captain as saying that he asked passengers to get off the ferry before he abandoned the vessel himself. Another lawyer defending the first mate said crew members requested emergency help from the Coast Guard and thought it would be best to evacuate passengers when rescue experts arrived. For the murder charges to be upheld, prosecutors will need to overcome a number of challenges. They need to prove the crew members did not make efforts to rescue passengers even though they knew those on board would die. The prosecution also needs to prove the direct link between the acts of the crew and the death of the passengers. The next session is scheduled for next Tuesday, and the verdict is expected no later than November. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The Korean government has so far spent about $82 million dealing with the aftermath of the Sewolho ferry accident since April 16th, according to the nation's finance ministry. The total is separate from the amount of money earmarked for boosting the economy, which has been hit hard by the disaster. Now, breaking down by sectors, the Defense Ministry has devoted the most at $28 million, which has been used for search operation equipment at the accident site, providing vessels, planes, and labor. Now, the Education Ministry also spent more than $10.5 million, money that was used on funerals and psychological treatment for the families of the victims.
When the latest news meets the latest business stories, we give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Business Today with Moon Gon-young. Every weekday, only on Arirang.
President Park Geun-hye's nomination of a new prime minister on Tuesday was the first domino in an imminent reshuffle of her cabinet and the presidential office. Now, political watchers believe a series of nominations and appointments will be made soon, even before the week is up. Our correspondent Choi Yoo-sun has more.
Contrary to earlier predictions, President Park is expected to carry out reshuffles of her cabinet and the presidential office before departing for Central Asia next Monday. That seems to be the consensus, as a swift move would be made to avoid a further delay in government restructuring and public service reforms, which the president promised in the aftermath of April's ferry disaster. On Wednesday, her spokesperson Min Kyung-wook said there was a possibility that changes could take place this week. Under normal circumstances, the president would wait for the prime minister nominee to be confirmed by the National Assembly at the end of this month or the start of next before making such a wide-scale change. But since the president cannot afford to waste any more time, her nominee Moon Chang-guk will likely take part in the process of choosing new cabinet ministers, while current Prime Minister Chung Hong-won would make the official recommendations. The speculation is that the nation's finance minister, who also acts as the deputy prime minister, will likely be replaced by the president's close aide and former ruling party floor leader Choi Kyung-hwan. Another potential candidate is current Presidential Economic Affairs Secretary Cho Won-dong. The ministers of Security and Education, both of whom came under fire for inconsiderate behavior after the ferry accident, may get the axe. It's speculated that someone from academia could take on the role of education minister, who will also sit as the second deputy prime minister. A number of President Park's senior secretaries, including ones in charge of the economy, culture, and political affairs, may either be named into the cabinet or given a different post. Meanwhile, her chief of staff and senior secretary for state planning are widely expected to stay put for now. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
Let's now move over to the National Assembly. It's been over a week since the opening of this month's extraordinary parliamentary session. But with no results to speak of yet, the ruling Saenuri Party's floor leader has proposed a set of measures to set government reforms in motion. Here's our Ji Myung-gil with this report.
Addressing the full assembly and members of President Park Geun-hye's cabinet on Wednesday, ruling Saenuri Party floor leader Lee Won-gu said his party will be at the forefront of reforming the government and party politics.
I propose the establishment of 3 special committees for reform. Committees to reform politics, to reform the government, and to take care of the people's livelihoods. These committees will provide a master plan to reform our country.
Earlier this week, rival party floor leaders held their first weekly meeting and shared the common view that the government should spur efforts to restructure the nation's safety management system. Floor leader Lee also proposed forming a joint consultative body between the Saenuri Party and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy.
The consultative body would discuss all agenda items, ranging from public livelihood bills to sending special envoys to North Korea.
If the joint consultative body is launched, lawmakers expect it to speed up initiatives to aid parliamentary operations. Currently in the spotlight is the Green Light Law, which aims to make it easier for bills to be voted on. Any bill that party floor leaders and the Assembly Speaker designate as a green light bill could be sent straight for a vote on the Assembly floor. On Thursday, the floor leader of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy, Park Young-sun, will deliver a keynote speech at the plenary session. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Let the countdown begin. Yes, 2 days up until the 2014 FIFA World Cup in Brazil, but there is another sporting event that will be hosted in northwestern city of Incheon here in Korea. It's the 2014 Asian Games, and it comes 100 days from today. Our Kwon So-hwa reports on the preparations and what we can expect from this fall's big sporting event.
Incheon, a port city in northwestern Korea that boasts the nation's third largest population, is gearing up to host the 17th Asian Games this fall.
I'm very excited since the events take place in my neighborhood.
I look forward to the games, as I have never watched such a big event up close.
The Asian Games first came to Korea in 1986 when they were hosted in Seoul and then again in Busan in 2002. Incheon was selected as the third Korean host city 7 years ago. Now, with 100 days to go before the big event, how prepared is the city? The city's new landmark Incheon Asiad Main Stadium was completed last month. 16 of the 49 stadiums that will be used for the games are newly constructed, while the rest have been remodeled. The city spent roughly $2.2 billion preparing for the games.
As an Incheon citizen, I do have my worries. I think it was too much of a financial burden for the city to build new stadiums.
Hosting such a high-profile event comes with risks, but the Korea Institute for International Economic Policy says the Incheon Games have the potential to generate an economic impact worth $1.3 billion and could create 270,000 new jobs.
Although we have financial difficulties, when the Incheon Asian Games are held successfully, Incheon will not only become a hub in Northeast Asia, but will grow into a global city.
The Incheon Asian Games Organizing Committee is trying to make this year's event the most economical, efficient, and eco-friendly one yet, an event that will serve as a role model for developing nations in Asia.
Diversity shines here is the slogan for the 2014 Incheon Asian Games. The city of Incheon says it will do its best to display the diversity of Asia and help Asia reach its development potential during the event. Kwon So-hwa, Arirang News.
Well, the ferry tragedy in April continues to weigh on the Korean economy, slowing down the pace of recovery. This time, it's the nation's job figures that have taken a hit. Our Hwang Ji-hye explains.
The Korean economy added 410,000 jobs in May from a year ago, bringing the number of employed in the nation to almost 26 million. But that marks 3 straight months of slowing job growth and the lowest gain since last July. Statistics Korea says slumping private consumption due to the deadly ferry disaster in April resulted in the lower growth in employment last month. It's no surprise then that the nation's service industry, which includes the retail, lodging, and restaurant sectors, added only around 320,000 jobs in May from a year earlier, far lower than more than 500,000 created in the previous month. Job creation in the leisure activities sector even dropped by 17,000. The statistics agency said earlier that service sector production had dropped 1% from the previous month, while retail sales were down more than 1.5%. That, the agency said, is a reflection of the lackluster domestic demand brought on by the disaster. While the government has cautioned that slowing consumer spending caused by the ferry tragedy could hurt the nation's economic recovery, the finance ministry says it's not considering an extra budget to further stimulate the economy. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Well, however, the nation's major companies have managed to expand their hirings last year, and this is according to Statistics Korea. Well, stats show that the total number of employees working for the nation's 47 groups stood at more than 1.4 million in 2013, up 4.6% from a year earlier. And that's, of course, according to market research firm CEO Score. This was despite combined sales of these companies falling by 2% and their operating and net profits trending downward. Experts believe President Park Geun-hye's pledge to raise the nation's employment rate to 70% by the end of her term in 2018 played a big role in the hiring bump. Now, this may not seem as being relevant to those of our viewers outside of Korea, but it's a long tradition or convention here in Korea for younger females to marry older males. However, that trend is changing, according to new stats released by the city of Seoul. 15.5% of couples who married in the city last year were made up of a younger man and older woman. That's nearly 7 percentage points higher than 20 years earlier. The average age at which people are tying the knot has also changed. Men got hitched at the average age of 32.6 years, about 4 years higher than back in 1993. Women got married at 30.4 years old. That's nearly 5 years older than it was 2 decades ago. LG's latest smartphone, the G3, is living up to the substantial hype and then some following its launch at the beginning of the month. The G3 has flown off the shelves here in Korea, selling 100,000 units in just 5 days and far outstripping even Samsung's flagship smartphone, the Galaxy S5. Here's our Kim Hyun-bin.
LG Electronics' newest G3 smartphone has garnered an explosive response from Korean customers, marking one of the best debuts yet for the electronic giant. Compared to the previous G2 model, the G3 doubled sales, with roughly 130,000 units purchased in a little over a week of its release. On the first day alone, over 14,000 smartphones were sold, whilst local and global competitor Samsung Electronics was only able to sell 7,500 of its Galaxy S5 smartphone. But what's behind this sudden surge for Korea's number 2 maker?
There are several reasons. First, the performance was enhanced with the UHD screen, and also the camera, with laser point focus, grabbed customers' attention. Secondly, Samsung's Galaxy S5 had lower than expected sales, while Apple's iPhone 6 will not come out until late in the third quarter. Lastly, the business suspensions for Korea's 3 major cell phone carriers were lifted, creating more sales.
U.S. information technology website GSM Arena ranked LG's G3 at the top of its list, beating out the likes of Samsung's Galaxy S5 and Sony's Xperia Z2. In recent weeks, LG smartphone sales have been ranking in the top 3 for the first time, behind only Apple and Samsung. Despite the rave reviews and hot sales, experts say LG will struggle to take a big bite out of the gap with the leaders. In terms of revenue-based share in the global smartphone market, Apple had 38%, Samsung 30%, and LG a mere 5% in the first quarter of this year.
LG is expecting to sell over 10 million units overseas, but it will be hard to reduce the gap in the big 3 with just the G3 model, but it could be seen as a good starting point.
The G3 is only available in Korea at the moment, but is scheduled to be released in 100 countries later this month. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
A fundamental change is taking place in Samsung Electronics stocks, the mega cap behemoth in Korea's benchmark Kospi. The driving force behind this roller coaster ride, experts say, is the possibility of governance reform at Samsung. Let's take an in-depth look. Our regular contributor, Dr. Kim Byung-eun, joins me live in the studio. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Dr. Kim, now since announcements were made that Samsung's IT affiliate, service affiliate, Samsung SDS, and the effective holding company of Samsung Group affiliate, Samsung Everland, will go public, Samsung's shares have been on the rise, to say the least. Now, I think we need for you to put this into perspective for us.
Right. They were on the rise until, I suppose, beginning of this week or the end of last week, I have to say, because this week, I didn't check the latest numbers for today, but yesterday and days during this week, they were falling again. And this is something that needs to be explained. At the announcement of SDI, Samsung SDI and Samsung Everland being offered, their shares being offered to public, the shares rose because there was an expectation that Samsung's very complicated governance structure would be simplified and modernized, if you will, in the way that investors would like. That's why we got to see the rises of these shares. But since then, probably starting from the beginning of this week, we've been hearing that that may not be the case. The simplification of the structure may not be coming anytime soon. So ever since those kind of news were coming out, we see the shares falling. So overall, as you mentioned, a roller coaster ride is, I think, quite a reasonable way of describing the moves and ups and downs of the Samsung shares.
Right. I think the latest figures show that Samsung units actually were rallying after profit taking. So it's up and down, really a tumultuous ride there.
Right.
Now, we know the structure of cross-shareholding between Samsung companies are quite complicated, to say the least. They are trying to simplify that down. Paint us a picture of what it looks like right now.
We have prepared a picture that has been very much simplified in terms of describing the structure of Samsung groups of companies shareholding here. Let's present it on the screen here. It looks still very, very complicated, even though we have grossly simplified it there. Basically, what's happening is those sisters and brother, the third generation of Samsung family, holding considerable shares for Samsung Everland as well as Samsung SDS, while Chairman Lee Kun-hee sharing the holding considerable shares for Samsung Everland and Life and then electronics and so on. Now, what needs to be done in that picture in the future is, at least what investors were speculating until the beginning of this week, was that this sort of like a circular, complicated picture will need to turn into one or two or up to three of pyramids. One top for each pyramid coming down. Downwards, sort of like a triangle standing up. And that's a circular structure. So that transformation from this complicated circular structure into one or two and up to three pyramids, that is a transformation that investors were, I think, expecting up until the beginning of this week.
Right. So basically 3 points of
possibly 3 points.
Source, possibly three major points.
Pyramids,
and others stemming out from that a little bit.
Exactly.
Now, what are some of the hurdles that stand in the way of this simplifying process?
Well, talking about hurdles, we have many here. To start with, law, money, time, and strategy here. I don't know whether I can do this properly. I think we will need 2 full-day seminars with 10 corporate finance lawyers to explain the full picture here. So within the next 2 minutes, I'll have to say, first of all, law. When Chairman Lee Kun-hee pulls out his shares and then distribute them among the 3 of his children, that could make companies, like financial companies, which used to be the second largest shareholder of industrial company, could become number 1 shareholder, while these individuals have shares that would be in total size be ranked number 2. And that goes against the law here in Korea. We have laws in Korea that prohibit certain size of financial firms from holding considerable shares of industrial companies and vice versa.
Right.
And because Samsung companies are large, that's prohibited. So law comes in the way. And also money-wise, if you destruct or deconstruct the circular size of structure of holding and then make it into pyramids, you still need to buy considerable shares on the top to have those holding companies of it, so that holding companies will have considerable share for the bottom main business companies, like electronics and so on. That still takes a lot of money. You still have to purchase considerable number of shares, to become the controller of the holding company,
right.
which will control the main businesses.
Makes sense.
Makes sense. So it takes a lot of money. So that's a big issue here. And transformation, that itself takes a lot of time there. And then also strategy. Some people are saying whether Samsung would like to actually want this kind of separation of the businesses at this point, or should it go the same all the way for quite some time. So there is that confusion right there as well.
So why are we talking about a governance reform at this point again?
Because of the speculation, investors were thinking this is the right way to go. It has to be done one way or another. If not now, sometime in the future. And investors were expecting that it will be probably done now, but that expectation is not being met at this point. But so, as a conclusion, I think what we can conclude at this point is even if it may not take place this time, some people say within the time period of about 5 years, perhaps, because of the legal change and all that, they will need to take place. And besides, we have one Lee Gun-hee right here in place, but he may have to resign from that position one way or another, physically or whatever.
Right.
And there will have to be 3 tops in the company, so they'll have to break it down one way or another. That's why they're saying this transformation, no matter how costly and maybe how difficult legally, it will have to be done and carried out in coming years. That is the expectation. So what we have discussed today will remain as a possible feasible scenario down the road.
Right. As I suppose, a homework for Samsung to get it done in sometime in the future.
Exactly.
All right, Dr. Kim Byung-ju, thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
Now that's your business today on this Wednesday. Thank you for watching, and do join us again at 6 p.m. Korea time on Early Edition at 6.